Since 1972, video game consoles have been redefining what home entertainment could be, although at times more of a vision than a tangible product, with each new generation of consoles bringing progressively more powerful hardware. With transistors increasing pretty much in line with Moore's law, the obvious, perceivable difference to the everyday consumer comes in the form of bigger, more complex and infinitely better looking games. Every generation has those games that really push the latest killer consoles to their limits, draining every last ounce of performance from these machines. But with the ever-shifting boundaries of what exactly dictates cutting edge, sometimes it's nostalgia and not genuine quality that defines the legacy of a game. In this series, I take a critical look at these games that define childhoods, look back at the reception of the time, talk about personal experiences, and ask the question, with as little bias as possible, how good was it? Mascots. They are everywhere you look. They come in all shapes and sizes, and they act as the connecting tissue between the corporate world and the everyday Joe, being used as the vehicle to increase that ever-valuable market share. Sometimes, a mascot fulfills a need at the time to act as counterculture to the current societal zeitgeist, burning too bright and ultimately flying too close to the sun. Sometimes, a character lays in relative obscurity only to become the relevant meme of the moment, being destroyed by those whom he was created for. And sometimes, just sometimes, a mascot stands the test of time, not only acting as an icon for a generation of a bygone age, but becoming the cornerstone to a majority of childhoods since his creation, being held as one of the most recognisable characters on the planet, and creating untold riches for his masters. Of course, I'm talking about Disney's lovable rodent, Mickey Mouse. And finally, in his original form, Mickey belongs to everyone. Yep, I can finally play this clip with absolutely no worry of copyright claim. Not something I ever realised I wanted to do, but there you go. And this is because we are Mickey Mouse now. It's still a complicated issue due to trademark law. And to be clear, Steamboat Willie is the specific work I'm talking about. But after Disney's dodgy dealings, lobbying to extend the copyright in 1976 and 1998, you bet I'm happy that time has finally caught up with the House of Mouse. And to celebrate this historical landmark, I thought what better time to cover one of Mickey's most iconic video games, Fantasia. No, I'm fucking with you. It's Castle of Illusion. Of course it's Castle of Illusion. Full title, Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. Oh, that's a mouthful. And calm down Mania fans, I said most iconic, not best. Get your finger off that dislike button, Disney stans. I don't hate the company, I just love a bit of schadenfreude. We all do deep down. But regardless of my ramblings, I love this game in all of its iterations. Castle of Illusion was a game I played to death in my younger years. It was one of my favourites back in the day, and I regularly go back for a quick playthrough from time to time, so I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts with you. At the time, Disney was very protective of its intellectual properties, especially Mickey. This wasn't his first video game. Probably the most somewhat notable interactive outings came in the form of 1983's The Sorcerer's Apprentice, released on the Atari 2600, 1984's Mickey's Space Adventure, Sierra Online's stab at putting the mascot in a kids' adventure game, and Mickey Mousecapade, developed by Hudson Soft in 1987 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. However, none of these games gained much, if any, traction, leading Disney to set tight restrictions on Sega's interpretation of Mickey. Disney were apprehensive at first, but this was a time of indulgence for the Japanese giant, with Sega at the time offering generous guaranteed payouts, attempting to grab properties to rival the market leaders Nintendo. It was a period that saw Sega sign up big stars such as Michael Jackson, Joe Montana, and of course an infamous deal signing James Buster Douglas after his shock win against Iron Mike Tyson, only for Sega to see their newly crowned heavyweight champion get knocked out in his first title defense bout against Evander Holyfield before the game was even released. Sega leveraged this war chest to pique Disney's interest, with a deal being struck for 2 games, Castle of Illusion and the divisive Fantasia. The game had a relatively smooth development cycle, controlled by Sega of America and programmed by Sega of Japan's AM7 department. Director Imiko Yamamoto walked a tightrope bowing to Disney's family sensibilities while trying to make a game with somewhat of a dark edge. Rather than sticking with Mickey's childlike image, Yamamoto drew from all-time Disney classics to tell a story with far more substance. Using Snow White as the main inspiration, she concocted a narrative to shake off preconceptions of Mickey Mouse. Castle of Illusion was eventually released in Japan on the 21st of November 1990. And for those of you that weren't there, it was kind of a big deal. Castle of Illusion was used as the example of what was possible on the Megadrive. We need to put this into perspective. This predated the age of the Blue Hedgehog, and Sega was desperate for a mascot to rival the Big N's rotund plumber. Mickey wasn't viable in the long term, Sega didn't own him, but with failed mascot attempts of characters like Alex Kidd, in the short term, Disney's mouse would have to do. Sega would go all in heavy on marketing, as they did with all big licenses signed up to the Megadrive. This was evident looking at publications of the time. Probably the best example available today is Sega of America's global marketing director, Al Nielsen, appearing on the video game console edition of Computer Chronicles in 1990. Sega was putting Mickey Mouse front and center, making sure everyone knew about their new, groundbreaking games.
Now watch this. There he is, and he's just, waiting for it.
One of his old moves from the cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, he's pretty close to the edge there. Let's see, he might have a little problem. Uh-oh! Oh, look at the emotions on his face.
You would think with this being an exclusive title, there would only be one game to talk about. But that is not the case. In fact, arguments could be made that the flagship Mega Drive version of this game wasn't even the outright best iteration. Now, I know that comment is somewhat provocative, but it was a statement oozing with subtext. Pound for pound, is the Mega Drive version the best game? Yes, absolutely. For me, it's not even a matter of opinion. The graphics are better, the gameplay is tighter, it's an objective statement. However, when context is added to the conversation, taking into consideration the relative low power of the 8-bit Master System and Game Gear versions, tech, which by this point was the definition of last gen, the debate of best version becomes far more nuanced. The Master System and Game Gear versions of the game used a similar build, being the same game for all intents and purposes, and it's a truly excellent title. Developed by Sega R&D 2, the 8-bit iteration was released in 1991. Although scaled down, it stays remarkably faithful to its Mega Drive namesake. It follows the same story, keeping much of the original spirit, and it has its own interpretation of the levels, keeping most of them intact. This was a personal favourite of mine, with the Game Gear version being my poison of choice back in the 90s. And yes, I understand I've been fully enveloped by the nostalgia monster here, but overall, due to portability, I played this version the most, and I could have easily given this build of Castle of Illusion its own retrospective, being in my opinion one of the best games on the Game Gear. But with so many games I want to cover, I have made the rule to pick the best build of multi-platform titles and basing the retrospective on that. But don't get it twisted, both are excellent, and if you play one, you really should try them both. Of course, I'm aware of the 2013 remake of the game, and while I enjoyed playing that version, it is too much of a deviation from the original game to be included here. The game is practically unbound by technological shackles, so making comparisons would be entirely unfair. So I will be putting a pin in the remake for now, as it could be something well worth revisiting in a future video. However, keep it in mind because it will come up later. Right, we've explored the development and ports of the Castle of Illusion, but how did the reviewers of the time feel about the game? Well, I have a transition for that. To the magazines! I'm treating you lot this time. I've managed to round up 3 magazines covering the Castle of Illusion. Not bad considering these magazines are 34 years old by now. God, I'm old. Starting off, we're looking at the February 1991 issue of Mean Machines number 5. And this was the multi-platform version of the Mean Machines brand. The review is a 4-page extravaganza, going through the levels, covering the items in the game, and talking about the mechanics of controlling Mickey. The 2 reviewers, Julian and Matt, heap praise on the game, with the former commenting, "I must admit I've been utterly glued to the Megadrive since this came into the office. It's a stunning game, and has an addiction that has you eating your meals while you play and giving up hours of sleep on consecutive nights." The review particularly praises the graphics and playability, ultimately awarding the game a lofty score of 95%. High praise indeed. On to the more obscure Zero, a magazine that covered consoles and computers like the Amiga. The Castle of Illusion gets a more modest 1-page here, but the review is no less positive. The reviewer has high praise for the gameplay, spending the review writing about the mechanics, giving the game another massive verdict of 94% out of 100. It's time to look at the bonus offering, a rather tatty copy of Sega Pro. This old boy is showing its age. And I left it to last because it's more of a summary, but the special surprise is it covers all 3 versions of the game. It's worth mentioning, this was published a year after the release of the Mega Drive build, and Castle of Illusion was holding up. The Mega Drive version gets 95 out of 100, praising it as the best Mega Drive game. The Master System version gets its own section, scoring a 93. But most interestingly, Sega Pro gives the Game Gear version the highest score of the 3, with an eye-watering 96. You can't see me, but I'm doing a little jig right now, because my opinion has been fully vindicated. Thanks Sega Pro, great stuff. Castle of Illusion was a massive seller for Sega, according to Computer and Video Games, topping the UK sales chart on release and becoming a regular feature for months after. Although, these charts seem to be more conjecture than actual sales, because going back to that issue of Sega Pro, Mickey's maiden Sega outing was only knocked off of top spot with the eventual release of Sonic the Hedgehog. So take these figures as conjecture rather than precise sales. This is confirmed by the excellent making of by Stray Fox. But with listing their sources as Sega Power, seemingly equally as presumed as the other magazines, I can't verify the sales figures. Nevertheless, it's an excellent video and well worth a watch. Link in the description. Regardless of the speculation, the simple fact of the matter is, Castle of Illusion was a massive hit. Although I was unable to nail down any official figures, a massive indicator of this being true is the vast amounts of copies available on eBay for the cost of a trip to the local Mackie D's. I've tried to be as clear as possible in this preface, but for complete transparency, I am heavily biased towards this game. In some ways, with Castle of Illusion, I might have more trouble separating myself from my own childhood nostalgia than even the mighty Sonic, because I spent countless hours playing this. I did read this article while doing research, written from the perspective of the author never playing the game, experiencing it for years through the words of others, and then eventually playing it, being left feeling very underwhelmed. I will take his points into consideration here, because I know I'm fully down the nostalgia rabbit hole with this one. Right, that's the setup. As for the playthrough, we are using the same hardware setup as usual for the Megadrive. For those of you that are new, I use an RGB modded, converted Asian VA1 Megadrive set to 60Hz. Output in component video using a Mega Everdrive Pro, as my original copy of the game is 50Hz PAL, upscaled by the RetroTink 5X and captured in 4K. So, grab your mouse ears, your short shorts and your oversized cartoon hands as we steamboat our way into the magical world of the Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. True to the time it was made, while the game does have this very nice intro, the full story was unveiled by diving into the manual. Listen, this is a Disney title, so we're going to do this properly.
It's a lovely day in Verda City. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and the sweet fragrance of flowers fills the air. Mickey and Minnie are happily dancing in the meadow. But suddenly, thick grey clouds cover the sun, and the birds fall silent.
Don't worry, Minnie. It will clear up soon,
Says Mickey. But before he can say another word, lightning flashes across the sky. Mickey quickly covers his ears and shuts his eyes. After a few seconds, he peeks to see if Minnie is all right.
Oh no, she's gone!
A musky odour overcomes the pleasant fragrance of flowers. Mickey glances up to see a witch on a broom hovering above him. It's Mizrabel, the evil witch, who is jealous of Minnie's beauty. Her bony fingers clench Minnie's arm.
This pretty thing is coming with me!
She shrieks. And away she flies with Minnie behind her, crying. Mickey chases the fleeing witch through the forest and past the towering mountains. Finally, he reaches the Castle of Illusion, perched on a high, craggy cliff. At its gate, he meets an old man bent over with age.
Long ago, I was the king of this castle,
Says the old man.
but Mizrabel took it from me. You must rescue Minnie before it's too late. Mizrabel is going to take Minnie's beauty for herself. She'll make Minnie look mean and evil, just like her. You can defeat her only if you have the 7 gems of the rainbow.
Where are those gems?
Asks Mickey.
You'll find them in the castle,
The old man replies.
but they are guarded by the Masters of Illusion. They have created strange worlds and bizarre creatures to keep you from reaching Minnie. You must be careful.
Mickey thanks the man and hurries through the gate. In the castle, Mickey opens every door to every room. Each door leads to a different world of illusion. Can Mickey find the 7 gems of the rainbow in time to rescue Minnie? It's up to you. Wander through the forest and ancient ruins. Splash into a cup of tea and leap across fluffy cupcakes. Knock down the enchanted mushrooms, toy soldiers, and armoured knights with Mickey's bounce attack. Minnie needs your help. Hurry!
To be fair, I love that writing style. Will the government get their hands on the Wranker's time machine? Will he get to 1,000 subscribers? It's up to you. Subscribe, like and comment with your mouse-clicking fingers. The Wranker needs your help. Hurry! Too much? I like how the game delivers this setup in the intro. Although it's not as elegant as the story told in the manual, it gives us everything we need to know about the narrative backstory. I will mention this weird animation glitch. I'm not sure what it is, but it looks like Mickey's mask is slipping and he's a little happier about becoming an eligible bachelor than he's letting on.
See ya, Minnie. Sing a line for Mickey. Let's get some bitches.
Just to be clear, this is on real hardware with the original game. Strange. Anyway, the Master System and Game Gear iterations had a similar intro, albeit without the animated set piece. But in its place, it had a very nice and colourful comic style artwork, ironically enough, using the old iteration of Mickey, looking more like his Steamboat Willie appearance rather than his more modern look in the Megadrive version. How fitting considering the reason behind making this video. Apparently, Mizrabel not only wants Minnie's beauty, but also her popularity? Going to be honest, if you're after someone's popularity, stealing their beauty doesn't seem the best plan. That is, unless Mizrabel is planning to hit the clubs after attaining said beauty. She'll be popular with all the boys. The game takes us automatically to the options screen. Quite an unusual setup, and gives us a chance to pick the control scheme. Not that the game's controls are particularly in-depth, and we get to make use of the excellent sound test. I love this little animation with Mickey sitting on the swing and moving to the different options. I know this looks like a nothing burger, but at this time, it was these little touches that made Castle of Illusion stand out from other games. We are given 3 different difficulty settings: practice, normal, and hard. The difficulty in this game is somewhat of an enigma to me. Looking over the manual, the difficulty is explained as practice only having 3 levels and 3 power gems to collect, starting you off with 5 power spheres, with normal and hard both having 5 levels and 7 gems, with the only difference being between starting with 3 and 2 power spheres respectively. According to the manual, the only other differences comes from the continuum mounts, with practice having 4, 2 in normal and none in hard. Although I believe the manual is underplaying the difficulty system. I found this forum post with the users discussing this, mentioning the difficulty mechanic seems to go a little deeper, speeding up the bosses, increasing their hit points. I did some testing and the OP is spot on. Not only are the bosses faster and harder to kill with double the hit points, the levels are also much harder. They add many sneakily placed enemies, and replacing the throwing weapon placement with gems. You sneaky bastard, manual. I opted for normal, as I like to play these games as most would, but I did play through on the hard difficulty, and I can confirm it's a much more challenging experience. I highly recommend it for someone who's familiar with the game, looking for an additional challenge. You will have to take this with a pinch of salt, as I can't find the post to source it, but I did read somewhere that there is a difference between the endings on hard and normal. But there was no difference in my playthroughs, so unless it's a PAL thing, then we can officially mark this as debunked. Onto the game, and this is what you would consider the level hub, giving access to the worlds of illusion. This is automated on the Megadrive, but on the 8-bit version, you have control of Mickey in this section, being able to select the level. But there is none of this here, so the game selects the first level for us, the forest. Now, on presentation, I have no notes for improvement. This is just superb. The level is colourful. The designers use parallax scrolling to give the scene the feeling of a dense forest. And you have to remember, as mentioned, this predated Sonic the Hedgehog. And while parallax scrolling is a technique which has been used in media since the 30s, being used in video games since Jump Bug in 1981, the 16-bit consoles was the first time developers had unrestricted access to multiple, independent background layers in the home, making true parallax the new hotness. Castle of Illusion is one of the first games I remember seeing this effect in, being used to this degree, and it's fitting, because while a different technique, with the same outcome, Walt Disney was one of the pioneers of multi-layer scaling. The precursor to the dolly shot, made famous by Alfred Hitchcock. Snow White was the first feature-length animation Walt used this technique in, and it was a very powerful effect. Anyway, that's enough gushing over parallax scrolling, and moving on to the animation, it's very impressive. The executive producer of the game, Emiko Yamamoto, talked about the development of the game in a 2013 interview, expressing how important Mickey's animation frames were. The interview talks about how extra frames of animation were added to Mickey, and Emiko uses Mickey's jump as an example, explaining how they increased its length, upping the amount of animation frames used. Reading interviews, it seems the game was designed around getting the most out of Mickey's animation. Not only is the animation great when in motion, but while standing still, Mickey will sway with his arms behind his back, and when on the ledge, he will react to the situation. It was a stipulation Sega made that Mickey can never stop moving. After Sonic was released, showing off all of his attitude, Castle of Illusion's forward thinking was easy to forget, but at the time, this was all very innovative. Taking a look at the mechanics, the gameplay while controlling Mickey is not complicated. He literally only has 3 basic moves. He can jump, duck, and shoot a projectile. This is offset by tight gameplay, and while this works, more moves certainly would have improved this. While Mickey can jump, and your initial instinct will be to jump on enemies, you will quickly learn something isn't right. Mickey has a 2-stage jump, needing to press jump a second time or down on the D-pad to turn your harmless jump into a deadly bum drop, and we all know how dangerous Mickey Bum can be. Jesus Christ, I need to grow up. This is an interesting take on the attack system, and it came down to Disney's tight control over the mascot. Disney had made strict rules around how Mickey could kill enemies. No kicking or punching was allowed, so this was a happy middle ground, with Mickey also being able to throw projectiles to combat his foes. Disney's policies didn't stop with Mickey's attack. Sega were told Mickey wasn't allowed to die, even in a game. A simple workaround was to change lives to tries, and this was an interesting discovery for me, because as a kid, lives being called tries stuck out to me as odd. As for the actual level, the forest is an easy-going stage. We get some simple early enemies, including trees, mushrooms, and probably the trickiest of the 3, the projectile shooting flowers. The first level is broken up into sections, and once in the second section, we get a new mechanic, swinging.
Hello. Yeah? I'm here for the gangbang?
No, not that kind of swinging. The game actually does this well, making grabbing and letting go of vines very simple and consistent, something not all games got right, not mentioning any names. Mickey is invulnerable while in this state, making getting over these pits very easy. I'm not impressed with the secrets down an instant death pit trope though. It's something I first saw in the Game Gear port of Sonic the Hedgehog, and hiding secrets in this manner is a dick move. Once at the end of this section, Mickey runs down a slope being chased by a giant apple. And it's little more than a set piece, but it exemplifies the pace in which Mickey moves. And the movement in this game is very slow. There is no running apart from these sections, and I have to say, if there was one area I would change to improve this game, it would be in the speed department, as after a while, it gets a little draining. It's a limitation that was set by the animation style, a trade-off the developers set to get the stunning visuals in the game. In fact, to prove that point, the footage you have been watching on the screen is actually from Retro Brando's world record speedrun. Yeah, that was a hack move, and I don't like misdirection, but it speaks to how slow the movement really is when the fastest playthrough in the world looks like a slow slog. After reaching the exit door, we move on to the third section, and it's here we need to talk about the soundtrack of this game. It won't be everyone's cup of tea, but it's fully in line with Mickey's image, and the track on this level is one of my personal favourites. The sound also changes with the mood of certain levels. Very impressive. This section is very nice on the eye, and the gameplay is switched up. Mickey has to contend with moving leaves, giant spiders, and instant death pits. Well, I say giant spiders. The size scale in this game is a little confusing. Although a mouse, Mickey isn't small. This is him next to Pluto, a full-sized dog. Wait, is Pluto a miniature dog? Is Mickey actually mouse size? My whole world outlook has been turned upside down. Once we easily circumvent this area, it's back to the forest, and this is a great switch in tone. We climb the tree, the sky turns dark, the music switches to a minor scale, giving a spooky sound, and the enemies turn into ghosts. It's a nice set piece, and early doors you can see why this game was so popular at the time. These ghosts aren't here to hurt Mickey though, they are here to offer an opportunity to the high ground of the stage. Bouncing on them and successfully making it to the top of the trees rewards us with diamonds, apples and power spheres. I love this kind of gameplay. I went into this gameplay mechanic in the Sonic Retrospective, and the high and low ground is a mechanic aggressively used in that series. But this is somewhat of a one-off in this game. Multiple paths isn't something Castle of Illusion uses, and overall, to its detriment, can be a very linear experience. Regardless, this is nice to see, and once through the caves, it's on to the first boss battle with one of the Masters of Illusion. Fittingly, the first master is a tree, with the design further leaning into the game's clear inspiration. As I mentioned earlier, Amiko Yamamoto cited Disney's full-length animated feature Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as a major point of inspiration. But it's as early as the first boss we can see how much inspiration she took. Mizrabel is clearly influenced by the evil queen, with the comparison becoming even more obvious later in the game. We have seen giant red apples, and looking at the first boss, it's clear to see how its design is very close to the scary trees Snow White encounters in the forest. It's quite remarkable how close the developers got to the style of Disney's animated films. The final boss, once the attack pattern is learnt, isn't hard, but it can take some trial and error to learn this. The roll attack is simple to avoid, with the trickiest part being circumventing the random falling pattern of the acorns. It's a fight made much trickier on the hard difficulty, with the faster speed and the increased hit points. But once beaten, Mickey gets the first gem of the rainbow, and we are on our way. Right, the forest is beaten, the door is blocked off, and it's on to my personal favourite level when I was a kid, Toyland. Obviously, I don't have to explain to you why this was my favourite. You know, kids kinda love toys, and Toyland can be a deceptively tricky level. We get to see where those tin soldiers came from in the opening cutscene, and Mickey is a brave boy, risking a bayonet to the bum to rescue Minnie.
Look at the emotions on his face.
The theming here is superb. As well as the tin soldiers, we get remote control aeroplanes, jack-in-the-boxes, and look at this parallax background. A large door with a wallpapered room gives me the instant impression these are toys belonging to a kid stacked up in their room. It's great atmospheric storytelling. In a one-off change, we see a greyed out exit door at the start of the stage, meaning we're going to have to climb. It's here we start to really see the biggest weakness of this game. As I mentioned, it's just far too linear. Apart from the small section in the forest, every level from here on out will only offer one path to the end of the level. It's a shame, because at this point, the king of side-scrolling platformers, Super Mario Bros. 3, had already been out for 2 years, and lessons could have been taken from that title to greatly improve this game. SMB3 offered so many fun secrets and different ways to complete the stages. With the superior power of the Megadrive over the NES, it certainly wouldn't have been a hurdle for this talented team. At the end of the day, that isn't the route Sega took. And this is what we got, a game leaning far harder into set pieces rather than diverse level routes. But taking a lead from Nintendo would have added far more replay value. I know saying this game could have been much better if it copied this other game I like is a very room temperature hack take, but I think it's a valid observation here, considering this would have been totally in line with a game with the word illusion in the title. And to be fair, I never said I wasn't a wet brain hack. Regardless, the first section of Toyland is a very easy affair. Taking your time and bum dropping the enemies will eventually lead to the exit key, flattening the blocks, initiating this nice set piece. Well-timed jumps will be rewarded with diamonds, and the exit door is now open, leading to the second section. Here we get some new gameplay elements, such as bouncy springs, sticky jelly, and breakable blocks. These blocks are a nice touch, occasionally hiding power stars. And look at this, secret passage blocks. Look at you, Sega, adding in secrets to improve the gameplay. I'm proud of you. Although this is offset by a new enemy. Oh, the fucking clown. God, I hate this thing. They were irritating inconveniences in the 8-bit version, but it's in the Mega Drive version they reach peak-ass buggery. They throw balls in the air, making bum dropping tricky, and when killed, their unicycle goes on the rampage. They are a nuisance, but at least they kill the other enemies, I suppose. Again, this is a very straightforward, linear stage, and once at the exit door, we go to the third and final section of Toyland, and the game has a few tricks up its sleeve. We get a new item to pick up, and look at this. Frame by frame you can see what the game is doing. Literally squishing and flipping the screen. I realise it's a clever set piece rather than active hardware scaling, but considering the registers recalls the sprite positions, repopulates the screen, and drops the enemies to the bottom of said screen, all within a matter of seconds, this is incredibly impressive. Is it gimmicky? Yeah, totally. But that is what this game does well to make up for the linearity. Usually, at the time, developers would design a cool looking mechanic and then base the whole game around it. Let's take Sonic the Hedgehog as an example, as these two titles were heavily entwined, both being early examples of the Mega Drive's abilities. The special stage and game physics were mechanics made before Sega even settled on what the game would be. Yuji Naka then designed Sonic the Hedgehog around said mechanics, and while it did work, the whole game relied on that. It's something the SNES, with its Developer Mode 7, was particularly guilty of. Games like Pilot Wings and Mario Kart totally hung their hat on the playfield rotation abilities of the DSP-1 chip, but here, all the impressive set pieces are one and done. All that work to make one stage stand out. I'm not saying Sonic, Pilot Wings and Mario Kart were bad games for doing this. On the contrary, they were great games, but Castle of Illusion's unique approach to this is, in my opinion, what is at the core of this game feeling like such a genuinely unique adventure. This upside down mechanic makes short work of those pesky clowns. And look, more subtle secrets. Good times. This section isn't long in length, but what we do get is a treat. And once we go through the exit door, we get our second Master of Illusion. This is a strange battle. I remember back in the day getting killed here, running down the continues, starting over, only to be once again bettered by this goofy looking bellend. I just couldn't work out how to beat his glove attack. No matter what I did, I couldn't jump over this attack. Now, if I was to summarise Kid Me, I would say stubborn but stupid, a bad combination. Not much has changed. I have no idea why I lost the ability to push the down button back then, but it is what it is. And once I found this revolutionary new pro strat, I realised how easy the fight is. There is one word to describe this boss. Cheese! And I can't see how the QA testers missed this. But once you crouch in the corner, the boss will be unable to reach you, jumping against the wall, bouncing back, missing with the punch, and then simply jumping on the springs to attack the head will get the job done. This is by far the easiest master of illusion, and I'm marking this one down to janky game design. This is a very front-loaded game, meaning I needed to go quite in-depth with the first couple of stages. But don't worry, I know being this pedantic will lead this to being an 8-hour video, so I will pick up the pace. But the main takeaway so far that I've been trying to convey to you is the early game really is an excellent showpiece of the Megadrive's abilities in its early years. And it's easy to see why this game was used as an example of the console's abilities pre-blast processing. So, we have the second gem, and it's onto the Storm. While researching, I found something interesting regarding this stage. I find pre-alpha and beta information on these old games very intriguing. Like an alternate what-if paradox, but games of this era were considerably tight-lipped regarding prototypes, and pre-release footage for this game is equally as scarce. It took years until we eventually got the Sonic 1 beta, with its existence only known through rare, low-resolution magazine screenshots. The cutting room floor is my go-to for this type of information, but it has very little information on this game, except some unused graphics and a teacup stage that never made it into the final game. But I found something that hasn't been listed, and get the trumpets, this is an exclusive big reveal. Yep, the sky background was slightly different. Sorry, little underwhelming. But in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And I was quite happy to find this. It was tricky to decipher the source, as the site where I found this image has no information about its source. But after exhausting the abilities of reverse image search, I did some deep diving and eventually worked out this was apparently an advert in some revisions of the North American Sonic the Hedgehog manual. The only way I could find this exact image was by looking at the manual in the Sonic 1 section of Sonic Jam. Bloody hell, what a rabbit hole. Regardless, it was a good change, with the final sky layer looking far more impressive and menacing. As for the actual level, it's not bad. There were more secrets, which is good, but I'm not a fan of this trial and error gameplay, having to fall down a hole, being carried by the undercurrent, and repeating until the correct route is found. I always feel this kind of gameplay is just included to extend the gameplay time while trying to whittle down the players' lives. Sorry, I mean tries. It's not the end of the world, but I couldn't remember which one to use, and I just ended up feeling irritated. Did someone say irritated? Ooh, let me tell you about irritation. More specifically, these little shits. The bats are the worst enemies in the game, and while not as big an issue in the normal difficulty, on hard they are unfairly punishing. I don't mind hard enemies losing to them because I wasn't good enough, but what I can't abide is cheap enemy placement, and that is the category these bastards fall under. I know I said I wasn't judging the game by the hard difficulty, but the bats are so egregious, I just have to bring them up. Problem is, the level designers place them in the exact spot they know you have to jump into, and once activated, they randomly fly all over the screen. I hate enemies that are unavoidable without previously playing and memorizing the stage. As I said, it's just so cheap and entirely unfair. I won't keep bringing them up, but keep it in mind, from now on, they are littered throughout the rest of the game. We eventually pick the right hole and given access to the exit door of the first section. The second section isn't anything special. It's a tight platforming stage over an instant death pit, and while I hate instant death pits with a passion, it's perfectly fitting for Castle of Illusion's slow, meticulous gameplay. Overall, The controls are pretty tight, so with a little patience, there's no reason you couldn't make it to the end without losing a try. But it's the third section where the bullfuckery gets turned up. Again, this isn't a massive problem on normal, but on hard, this is punishing. You have to get to the next section before the water begins to rise, but on hard, the intervals are shorter and the bats make this a nightmare. Not only do they fly down the tunnel blocking you, but they also fly around while waiting for the water level to fall. Eventually, with luck and prayers, we get to the end, and it's time to fight the third master of illusion. This very underwhelming looking frog dude. Honestly, this is a pretty fun boss. Here it's all about timing. If you can judge where he lands after jumping out the statue, he can be hit first time, but misjudge it, you will get hit, and he's a nimble little bugger, so catching him will be a challenge. This is one of the rare bosses that require the same amount of hits regardless of the difficulty. After bum-bashing him 5 times, the struggle is over. Right, we are halfway through, and the game is picking up the pace. Although there are 4 gems still to collect, we only have 2 more levels, with 2 gems per level, the first of which is the library. Now this level further shows what I briefly mentioned about the size scale in the game. Sometimes Mickey seems normal size, but here, Mickey is 1/6 of the size of a leather-bound book. I suppose it plays into the illusion aspect of the game, but to be fair, back in the day, this didn't stick out to me at all. I only noticed it when taking a critical look at the game. I like the look of this level. It feels like we are a tiny mouse on a bookshelf, making our way through the obstacles. And that wallpaper has Grandma's house written all over it. I feel like I can smell the musk in the library.
I have many leather-bound books, and my apartment smells of rich mahogany.
We're not in this stage for long. Mickey climbs into a milk bottle and gets transported to a world of sweets, or candy for our American friends. See, look how inclusive I am. No, I will not call the Nintendo the NES. It's the NES, and I will die on this hill.
Don't be such a pedantic prick, Wranker. Also, it's time to fulfill my final master plan.
Oh, Nez, you're so funny. What will you get up to next? This is a tricky platforming section. These red dolphin things are really reminiscent of the Cheep Cheeps from Mario, and just as irritating. The milk level does look nice though. The developers used 2 background layers, putting the first in the foreground, containing the milk, splitting the other background layer into 2, and moving them at the same speed and giving the layer render priority. It's an ingenious technique and gives this stunning effect. After traversing the platforming, we are given our 4th gem, and it's back to the library. This really is a nice themed stage, and that is exemplified when we reach the light switches. Using the cord as a swing, the lights in the stage will switch from on to off when grabbing hold. Again, this was a hard trick to pull off on the Megadrive. On the fly, changing the lighting of the level. And for all their effort, this is the only place the game uses this mechanic. After negotiating the swinging section, dodging the giant books and avoiding enemies, we come to the next mini section, the cup of tea. Mickey can jump in the cup of tea, initiating a swimming section to grab some goodies. I remember loving this, really enforcing that world of illusion aesthetic, something that wouldn't have been out of place in Alice in Wonderland. This was an extra section in the Megadrive version, but on the 8-bit game, these sections were required to progress in the game. Some more platforming takes us to the second milk level, bringing us to the next boss. According to the Stray Fox video on the development of the game, art director Takashi Yuda wanted to have Elliot from Pete's Dragon as the boss. However, he couldn't find the right theming to make it work. It's said producer Jim Halperer sent Candy to Yuda as inspiration, and the team settled on making the level candy themed. The boss's body is made out of red licorice, with its head being very reminiscent of Elliot. Take that story with a pinch of salt. As I said, I can't verify Stray Fox's sources, but it makes for a great story, and why ruin a good anecdote with pesky sources, am I right? I'm glad they didn't use Elliot. I watched the film countless times as a kid, and Elliot was depicted as a gentle giant, only made aggressive when his friend Pete was in trouble, and I don't think he fits as an evil boss. The fight can be tricky or normal, but it's a real challenge on the hard setting. There is an air of randomness to the Licorice Dragon, popping up from any of these 4 points, and once out the milk, he will either do a looping attack, the easier to circumvent, or make a quick turn coming directly at Mickey, and it's hard to know what attack he's going to do. Well, that is how it would seem on the surface, to a first-time player, but I played this game multiple times for this retrospective, and unfortunately, I have to ruin the boss for you, because in fact, it's not random at all. If we number the gaps 1, 2, 3 and 4, the Licorice Dragon will follow the same pattern every time. 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 1. Sorry everyone, but a grumpy old man can't help but ruin the mystery of the game.
The Licorice Dragon is actually predetermined.
Oh. Old Wranker! Ruining everything!
Once getting the required hits, we take down the 4th Master of Illusion. And with 5 gems collected, we have 2 more to go, and the final level is certainly going to make us earn the remaining rainbow gems. The final level is the castle, and it's very fitting. The bright, fun theming is nothing but a distant memory. In the place of bright pinks and light purples, we get grimy greys and desaturated yellows. In the place of smiling jack-in-the-boxes and candy bridges, we get shadowy nights and bridges made of skulls. It's something the game designers absolutely nailed, making this feel like more of a serious affair, and with the increased difficulty, serious this is. Not only is the level a challenge, we have multiple directions to go, with most leading to a dead end. Once working out the falling patterns of the large blocks, we come to the deadly purple goo, leading to an instant death with no previous knowledge, and I'm not a fan. The level is tight, requiring your full attention, platforming over the goo of death, but when at the end, we are rewarded with our 6th gem, and we are in the end game. This level was made harder in the 8-bit version. The game doesn't hold your hand like it does here, and on top of making your way through a very challenging level, you also have to find your own way to get the 2nd gem of the level. The game shows you where the 2nd gem is, making it inaccessible, and only once the correct route is found, the game will let you move on. After a short dip, swimming against the current, and finding the right path, we get to the final section of the final stage, and it's not fun. This really does test everything you've learnt up to now. The platforming here is the hardest the game has to offer, and when throwing in rolling cogs and crush plates, losing power spheres becomes a given. This is before we even mention the Bell End Bats. They're back, and their placement is more egregious than ever. I don't mind challenging gameplay, but at times avoiding damage comes down more to luck rather than skill, and it's a game mechanic I don't love. The level, as all of them, is very impressive visually. Without exposition, the game makes it clear you are climbing inside a clock tower, using the clock components to make your ascension. Regardless of the game's flaws, the visual design is an absolute treat. We reach the top, we come face to face with the final Master of Illusion. The fandom wiki lists this as the oafish clockmaker. But to me, he pays a striking resemblance to Willie the Giant from Mickey and the Beanstalk. Before looking this up, even as a kid, I just assumed this was Willie, and I'm sure he was the basis for his design. As a boss, the clockmaker is one of the harder fights. The challenge comes from trying to learn his pattern, being invulnerable most of the time. Damage can only be done when he swings his hammer, and even then, the hitbox is tight, with damage being dealt to Mickey with even the smallest misalignment. With each hit, the clockmaker turns a darker shade of red, with him moving quicker each time. This isn't an overly difficult fight though, when the pattern is learnt, and once defeated, Mickey is rewarded with the 7th and final gem, accompanied with a message telling us we can now fight the evil witch Mizrabel, wishing us luck, and oh boy, are we going to need it, because Mizrabel isn't giving up Minnie without a fight. So, with all the gems in hand, Mickey walks outside the castle, and in a nice little cutscene, he throws the gems into the air, creating the Rainbow Bridge, giving us access to the tower and trapping Minnie. Upon entering the final area, Mizrabel transforms, making the connections to the evil queen from Snow White even clearer, and the final battle begins, with this being the hardest fight in the game. She appears in one of the 4 locations, and once she fully manifests herself, she summons circling ghosts, protecting her and shooting them in different directions. The window to inflict damage is short, and with Mizrabel disappearing and repeating the cycle. This is the whole fight, but getting the hits in is a rough time. I honestly can't remember if I ever beat this as a kid, but I would guess I didn't due to the difficulty. With a little skill and a lot of luck, we get 5 hits on Mizrabel, and Mickey grabs a gem from nowhere and throws it in the air, defeating the evil witch? Wait, what? Why didn't you ruddy do that straight away, you stupid fucking mouse? Now, we need to talk about the ending of this game, as it's not explained well. Mizrabel transforms, and after the tower begins to fall, Mickey, Minnie and Mizrabel escape on a broom. When playing this, I couldn't work out exactly what happened. Where did the gem come from? Why is Mizrabel no longer evil and helping Mickey? When are you going to hit the subscribe button? Sorry. I had a lot of questions. And the funny thing is, I didn't get the full story until playing the remake, released 23 years after the fact. And it goes a little something like this.
Mizrabel was dazed. But for how long? Suddenly, Mickey had an idea. What if he launched the rainbow gem at the witch? It might be his one and only chance.
Take that!
Time seemed to freeze for a moment before the gem burst into a cascade of rainbow light, filling every inch of the tower.
No! But I wanted to be the fairest of them all!
It was the cruel witch's turn to be trapped and powerless, encased in the spreading light. The terrible spell was broken. Minnie was free at last, and Mizrabel wilted and shriveled back to her true form. Minnie threw her arms around Mickey, and as he hugged her, he vowed never to let her go again.
Oh! The gem! Mickey, what's happening?
The castle was crumbling, but Mickey couldn't see a way out. What was this? Mizrabel was helping them escape? Mickey didn't have time to consider if this was another trick. Mickey and Minnie each held onto a broomstick and flew for their lives. Mizrabel had wisdom enough to know when she was defeated and why that was so. She had learned that there's a magic more powerful than any she had ever used. Mickey and Minnie knew it well, and even after what she had put them through, they shared its secrets with her. Now, Mizrabel's heart was filled with a different kind of magic. The magic of love.
Aww. Aww.
Now, where were we? The end.
So, it took 23 years to finally get the full story, but at least we know, and I'm not a game designer or a professional writer. I'm a hairy-ass fireman. but I have been watching Disney films since I was a wee lad. Well, not this trash. So if I was to fix this ending, keeping it in line with Disney's formula. After Mizrabel is defeated, the king should appear, being given his castle and kingdom back, bestowing Mickey with some sort of knighthood, and peace should spread throughout the kingdom with light returning to the land. Listen, it's not War and Peace, but that is an ending I came up with on the spot based on what I was expecting. Regardless, the game ends as it begins with Mickey and Minnie dancing in the forest, happy once again. Everything is how it should be, and roll credits. Minnie is saved, Mizrabel is defeated, and the residents of Vera City can live peacefully once again. So, with all that being said, let's rank it. The visuals of this game were truly groundbreaking at this early point in the Megadrive's life cycle. The developers used advanced techniques and unheard of amounts of animation frames to create a truly spectacular world of illusion. The mechanics in Castle of Illusion are very tight. Everything is very responsive and the game runs smooth as butter. The programmers would have had to work day and night to get some of the tricks this game pulls out running properly. But they made it happen, and the set pieces are by far the most impressive part of this game. Separating for personal taste, the sound effects and music in this game really does encapsulate the character. The Mega Drive was a notorious console to create music on, and Sega got the best out of the 16-bit powerhouse. It's not the best OST on the console, games before and after did it better, but overall, it's a great fit for Mickey. Gameplay is where the Castle of Illusion falls down. While simple controls aren't always a bad thing, while playing Castle of Illusion, the lack of diverse moves brings the score down. Probably the biggest sticking point for me is the lack of a sprint button. This leads to some very slow gameplay, making watching Mickey walk slowly from one side to the other somewhat laborious. The game is also very short, even considering the time of release. Although being a short experience isn't a positive, it does make the game more digestible for a quick pick up and play option in the current day. So even if you end up not liking it, the game takes up very little of your free time. The gameplay is a wee bit dated in the current day, but it's still a beautiful looking game and is a great option when looking for a little dose of Mega Drive fun. The Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse gets inducted into the Wranker Hall of Fame with a game-changing score of 82%, nestled nicely between Sonic the Hedgehog and the adventures of Batman and Robin. When I picked this game for How Good Was It, I did so because it was a game I loved as a kid, and I wanted to see how it holds up under a critical eye. I did have reservations though, worrying I couldn't be objective, but I'm surprised how much I ended up having to say about it. I found looking at the scarce developer reviews interesting, and when playing the game, going through the looking glass, I noticed a lot more to unpack than I anticipated. At the end of the day, this has changed my perspective on the game, originally hailing it as one of the most important games ever made, to seeing it for what it always was, a flawed classic. Castle of Illusion is still a great game though. The graphics and animations are stunning, the set pieces are still impressive, and surprisingly, it's shorter than I remember. I played this game 3 times as well as 2 times on the hard mode, not including the remake and the 8-bit version, and the shortest playthrough came in at under an hour. It wasn't unusual for games around this time to be short affairs, but 50 minutes is pushing it for even the early 90s. Just for perspective on how short this game really is, the speedrun I showed you earlier in the video is the current world record with no skips Retro Brando finished the game in 17 minutes and 11 seconds. On the upside, the short playtime makes it well worth a play, and surprisingly, even though a licensed game, it was one of the included titles in the Megadrive Mini released in 2019, giving everyone a hassle-free way to experience the game in the current day. For those of you that aren't into emulation like myself, if you have a Megadrive or a Genesis collecting dust in the loft, due to the large amounts of Castle of Illusion carts made, buying a copy will only set you back about 10 to 20 quid, with a dual release including Donald Duck's Quackshot for those wanting to be indulgent. In summation, I had fun revisiting this title, and if you have never played the original Castle of Illusion, it's well worth a playthrough. And for those of you that have, giving the hard mode a try is a great way to revisit this classic Disney title. That's the end of my manic ramblings about a 34-year-old game. I hope you enjoyed the video. The next episode will be the Season 1 finale of the series, and it's going to be a big one. So subscribe to be notified, and join me next time as we once again ask the question, how good was it? Until then, be good, stay safe, and I will see you next time.